You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein on Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show Ken Lopez, who's a bookseller, and he's got a specialty of dealing with authors who want to sell their papers. Ken, could you explain what that's all about?
Well, you know, over the course of a writer's life, they tend to accumulate a lot of papers if they don't throw them away. The manuscripts of the literary work they produce, the correspondence they have with publishers and editors, sometimes the correspondence they have with friends, many of whom will turn out to be writers themselves. As writers are like anybody else, they tend to congregate among themselves. So a writer who's kind of well into his or her career will have a large number of papers that have just been generated by doing what it is they do. And sometimes the writers think of them as kind of the trash I didn't throw out yet. And sometimes they think of them as, you know, the precious manuscripts of my yet to be fully appreciated great works.
But one day will be appreciated, right?
Exactly, yeah. And I think, you know, writers write because they believe in what they have to say. So they all really do think that, you know, what they have to say is of value. So they do tend to save the stuff.
So can you give me some examples of writers that we would all know who've done this?
Yeah, well, you know, I haven't handled all of these examples, but the beat writers are good examples because they were really vilified when they started writing in the 40s and 50s. Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs, and people said they weren't even real writers at all. But they thought very much of themselves. They thought they were onto something new and important and that their work mattered. And all three of them saved a lot of their papers. Each of the archives of those three writers has been sold for a large sum of money to a major research institution. Ginsberg went to Stanford University, Kerouac to the New York Public Library, and Burroughs to the New York Public Library, which is the one archive of those that I did handle.
Mm-hmm. When you say large sums, are we talking in the hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands?
Well, all three of those were way at the top end. Ginsberg was just under $1 million. The other two were above that. A lot of times, like the Kerouac archive, the terms of the agreement are that the exact figures remain private, and so it's speculation beyond saying it was over $1 million.
Right. How did you get involved in this kind of relatively obscure business?
Well, you know, I started selling books at a very unusual moment in American publishing history where a change in the laws meant that publishers had to declare their books out of print very quickly within a year of publication, or they would suffer tax burdens, and they started doing that, which had never happened before. So I started selling recently published but out of print and somewhat rare books. Since these were books written by living writers, I tended to then become familiar with the writers, with their other works, sometimes with editors who were dealing with them. I would end up with a small manuscript or a letter or something like that somebody would offer to me. And so I was selling these kind of parts of archives. And then one day a library called me and, you know, knew that I dealt very much in a particular author's works and asked me if I could help them acquire his papers. And I said, sure.
Tell me something about this tax issue with the publishers. So they would publish books, and then what was the incentive or what was the tax issue that made them want to declare the books out of print?
There was a pretty famous case in the 70s involving a power tool company, and it had to do with the way inventory was depreciated, and publishers were apparently, I don't understand taxes too well, but apparently they were able to depreciate their inventory, which would save them tax liability on the inventory after it was unsold for a certain period of time. The change in the tax law was that in order for them to be able to do that from this point forward, the IRS said they had to offer the inventory at the reduced depreciated price, which none of them could afford to do.
I see.
They basically they'd still sell the books for the retail price if somebody ordered them. They just said, we've got thousands of copies of this on hand, and we're having to warehouse it, and we're not selling very many anymore, so we're depreciating it. And up until a certain point in time, that was okay. And they would keep these books in print for 20 years because they had the warehouse space. But they wouldn't pay taxes on them as inventory or assets, except at this very low depreciated price. But the change in the ruling meant they had to offer them for sale for next to nothing, and they didn't want to do that.
Amazing how the IRS can dictate the way that businesses work. We are talking with Ken Lopez, who's a bookseller in sort of a niche area of the market, dealing with not only books, but some of the archives of authors. Ken, is this a lucrative business? Are there a lot of people involved in it?
There aren't that many people who do it as a large part of their business. I think a lot of booksellers will handle an archive from time to time, if it's in their area or, somebody book selling is still a largely regional activity. And if you're in Minnesota and have a Minnesota writers archive and the University of Minnesota is interested in it, there's a good chance you're going to be the person that ends up dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
But
given the changes in the marketplace today, especially with books, do you really feel it's still that localized, or just because of the internet, people can get things from here to there very easily?
Well, yeah, you're right. It's not that localized. It's localized on a small scale for a lot of different booksellers, but there are very few booksellers in this country who do it as a kind of major part of their regular business. There are a few.
And are there investors who get involved in this business who want to buy special manuscripts?
There are collectors who buy manuscripts, and some of them do it for investment purposes. Those kinds of things tend to still happen through Sotheby's and Christie's and so forth. The auction of Jack Kerouac's manuscript for his novel On the Road went through one of the major auction houses, and it sold to a collector/investor. So sometimes it happens, but it generally doesn't happen through a person like me.
I see. I'm curious about this because the Goldstein on Gelt show is in fact a personal finance show, but we don't just talk about stocks and bonds. We're always trying to bring on interesting guests who are in other areas of the business, but it sounds to me like you're saying that it's not the type of thing, a person who's diversifying his portfolio might not own stocks, bonds, a couple of rare books, and an expensive bottle of wine.
Yeah, you might do it with a couple of things, but the thing is, when I deal with archives, it's mostly kind of everything. It's like everything but the kitchen sink kind of thing. And most investors, would be happy to get an important manuscript of an important book, but don't want 100 boxes of papers of authors, shopping lists and that kind of thing, which institutions do.
I see. Do the institutions perhaps want this type of information less and less these days because it can just get scanned and digitized and put up on the net?
Well, yes and no. It has to be scanned from someplace. And as it stands now, the paper archives don't get scanned until they go into an institution. But we're moving into a much more digital world. And, in the future, it'll be an interesting question to see if these archives are handled the same way. I don't think they will be. I think there will be a different way that digital information gets accessioned into institutional collections and becomes available to scholars and students and researchers.
There's certainly obviously a sentimental value to collecting something that was written by an author before. You've been in this specific business for a long time. Do you feel that people these days are simply less and less sentimental about that type of thing?
I don't think so. I think people are sentimental in the sense that they value and prize the things that have mattered to them and that have changed their lives. And I think that's still happening to people. I think that we have yet to see how people will honor the items that changed their lives, but I think they will. I'm not sure what form it'll take, but it could certainly be collecting of, digital artifacts, the flash drive that contains the original, ones and zeros of the novel that changed my life.
Well, take it from me, for example. I've written a few books, but I have only ever written them on the computer. I don't have a single scrap of paper. So as a budding young author, well, I guess I'm neither budding nor particularly young anymore, is this the type of thing I should never throw away my scraps of notes in case posthumously I become famous, or is there even a chance during my life that people would want to have my notes?
I think that there's a good chance during your life people would want to have them.
Are you just saying that because it's me, or because you would say that to anyone?
No, just in general for your generation, basically, that there more and more the institutions are trying to come to terms with what they are calling born digital archives, and most archives these days are born digital. Many of them have no paper component, whatever. There was a poet in England a couple of years ago who sold her emails to the British Library. I think for £40,000 or something like that. And, kind of everybody was aghast or amazed or something because nobody quite could figure out what she had done. But that's going to be clearer and clearer and done more and more in the future because the work is worth preserving. It'll be preserved. And to some extent, there will probably be ways that people can monetize this. A lot of the writers I deal with, are not wealthy, so that selling their archive is an important component of their nest egg as they approach, kind of retirement age and so forth. And that's going to continue to be the case, I'm sure.
I see. So it's them selling their archive in order to have the cash to then set up a portfolio. Well, I guess when one of them comes knocking at my door for a financial plan, I'll know where he came from. We've been talking to Ken Lopez, who is a fascinating bookseller in a real interesting niche of the market. Ken, we're just about out of time, but in the last few seconds, can you tell people how they can follow your work?
We have a website, lopezbooks.com, and have books for sale there, have some smaller archives for sale, have some articles that I've written and that other writers have written about the book trade, about various subjects. But lopezbooks.com, yeah.
All right. Ken Lopez, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.